Hashtag, what if the person controlling your life never raised their voice? There is one truth that psychologists have always approached with caution. The most dangerous manipulators rarely raise their voices. They don't threaten you. They don't give orders. They don't force you to do anything. Instead, they make you believe every decision is entirely your own. You apologize willingly. You change willingly. You even feel grateful to them. Until one day, you look back at yourself and realize you've become a completely different person. The frightening part is this transformation doesn't happen overnight. It happens little by little, quietly, patiently, like water dripping onto a stone. No one notices what's happening until the stone has been worn away. And that's exactly how most manipulators operate. They don't control your actions first. They control the way you think. Once your thinking changes, every decision that follows changes naturally. Today, you'll discover 7 subtle signs that someone may be quietly manipulating you. Some of these signs may remind you of someone, or perhaps that person is much closer than you think. The human brain is designed to conserve energy. We can't question every person, every word, or every action all the time. If we did, our minds would quickly become exhausted. So the brain creates a shortcut. It's called trust. Once we trust someone, our brain automatically lowers its guard. That's why strangers usually have a harder time manipulating us. But a close friend, a partner, a family member, or someone we deeply care about can influence us much more easily. Not because they're stronger, but because we've already opened the door for them. And once that door is open, changing the way you see yourself becomes much easier. The first sign is when someone constantly makes you question your own memory. Imagine hearing these sentences over and over again. That's not what happened. You're remembering it wrong. I never said that. You're overreacting. At first, you argue back. You're confident in what you remember. But it keeps happening. Again, and again, and again. Eventually, something strange begins to happen. You start asking yourself, what if I really remembered it wrong? At that moment, the manipulator no longer has to prove they're right. You'll begin doubting yourself instead. There's a common story that illustrates this perfectly. A woman clearly remembers every argument she has with her partner. Yet every time she brings one up, he calmly replies, "That never happened. You're imagining things. I never said anything like that." At first, she trusts her memory. But after months of hearing the same response, she starts writing every conversation down in her phone, not to prove him wrong, but to check whether she can still trust herself. That's the truly frightening moment. Not because her memory has become weaker, but because her confidence in her own perception has slowly been worn away. Psychologists have long explained that human memory doesn't work like a video camera. Every time we recall an event, our brain reconstructs it rather than replaying it exactly as it happened. That makes us vulnerable to persistent contradiction. This doesn't mean your memory is always correct, but in a healthy relationship, both people try to understand what really happened. One person doesn't constantly insist that the other is always wrong. If you ever find yourself apologizing for events you're no longer sure even happened, the problem may not be your memory. It may be the person who keeps trying to rewrite it. And if someone can change the way you remember your past, they may eventually change the way you see your future. But that is only the beginning, because the next sign is even more subtle. It makes you feel guilty simply for saying no. Have you ever felt like refusing someone's request made you a bad person? Most people have. And that's exactly the emotional gap manipulators often exploit. They rarely force you directly. Instead, they make refusing feel far more painful than agreeing. Imagine a friend texting you late at night. "I'm having a really hard time. You're the only person who can help me." You're exhausted. You have work early the next morning, so you politely decline. A few seconds later, they reply, "It's okay. I'll figure it out alone. I just thought you cared." There's no anger, no jilling, no accusation. Yet somehow, you immediately feel guilty. You begin thinking, maybe I'm being selfish. Maybe I should help after all. Eventually, you give in, not because you wanted to, but because you couldn't bear the guilt. That's the difference between a sincere request and emotional manipulation. Emotionally healthy people respect your boundaries. They may feel disappointed, but they don't make you feel like a terrible person for having limits. Manipulators rarely attack your decision directly. Instead, they attack the image you have of yourself. If you want to be kind, they make you feel cruel. If you want to be loved, they make you fear rejection. If you're afraid of disappointing others, they quietly pull that emotional string every time. Eventually, no one has to pressure you anymore. The moment you think about saying no, you feel guilty all by yourself. That's when manipulation has become part of your own thinking. But what comes next is even more dangerous. Because it doesn't make you feel guilty. It makes you emotionally addicted. Have you ever met someone who constantly switched between warmth and distance? One day, they make you feel like the most important person in the world. They're caring, supportive, attentive. You feel incredibly lucky. Then suddenly, without warning, they become cold. They disappear. Their messages become shorter. Their affection fades. You immediately wonder, what did I do wrong? So you try harder. You become more patient, more understanding. You apologize more often. And just when you're about to give up, they become warm again, loving, gentle, affectionate. You feel relieved. You believe everything is finally back to normal. But it isn't. It's simply the beginning of the next cycle. Over time, you stop hoping they'll love you every day. You only hope they'll become the person they used to be. That's the moment you begin chasing hope instead of reality. Psychologists have observed something fascinating about the human brain. When rewards appear unpredictably, people often become even more attached. Think about a slot machine. If it paid out every time, people would quickly lose interest. If it never paid out, they'd eventually walk away. But when it rewards them only occasionally, they keep pulling the lever. Not because they're certain they'll win, but because they hope the next attempt might be different. The same pattern can sometimes appear in unhealthy relationships. You don't stay because they're always kind. You stay because those rare moments of kindness become incredibly valuable. You begin living on hope rather than reality. You keep remembering the beautiful beginning. You tell yourself, they're not really like this. They're just stressed. Things will get better. But as time passes, those good moments become increasingly rare, while you keep giving more and more of yourself. Eventually, you realize you're no longer in love with the person standing in front of you. You're desperately trying to hold on to the version of them that only exists in your memories. Hope is beautiful, but when someone learns how to control it, hope can quietly become a prison. One of the most powerful moments in any relationship is the moment you decide to trust someone with the parts of yourself you've spent years hiding. Maybe it's a painful childhood, a fear of being abandoned, an insecurity about your appearance, a failure you've never truly recovered from, or a memory that still hurts every time you think about it. You tell them because, for the first time, you feel safe. They listen carefully. They comfort you. They reassure you. They tell you, you can tell me anything. And in that moment, you believe you've finally found someone who understands you. But months later, during an argument, something changes. They don't insult you. They don't shout. Instead, they quietly say, maybe you're reacting like this because of your childhood. This is why you're so sensitive. Now I understand why people always leave you. Suddenly, the very wounds you trusted them with become the weapons used against you. That's no longer understanding. That's emotional manipulation. The most dangerous part is that these words often sound calm, reasonable, even caring, but they land exactly where they know you'll hurt the most. Healthy relationships protect your vulnerabilities. Manipulative relationships store them away, waiting for the perfect moment to use them. Ask yourself one simple question. When you're at your weakest, does this person help you heal? Or do they make you feel even smaller? Sometimes, that single answer tells you everything you need to know. The fifth sign is even more difficult to notice because it doesn't happen all at once. It happens so slowly that by the time you recognize it, your world has already become much smaller. Nobody can completely control you as long as other people around you are willing to say, something doesn't feel right. That's why manipulators rarely begin by saying, stop talking to your friends. That would be too obvious. Instead, they plant tiny seeds. I don't think your friends really care about you. Your family doesn't understand you. They're jealous of you. I'm only trying to protect you. At first, nothing changes. You still see your friends. You still visit your family. But every time you do, you start feeling guilty. Every time you spend time with someone else, you feel like you have to explain yourself. Eventually, you stop going. Not because anyone forced you, but because it's simply easier. Weeks become months. Months become years. Then one day, you scroll through your contacts. Every name is still there. But it's been a very long time since anyone called. Not because they stopped caring, but because you've slowly disappeared from their lives. Psychologists have long understood something important. We all need different perspectives to stay grounded. When only one voice remains, even unreasonable ideas can begin to sound completely logical. That's why isolation is one of the most effective forms of manipulation. The goal isn't to make you hate everyone else. The goal is much simpler, to make sure they're the only person you trust. And once that happens, almost no one is left to challenge their version of reality. The sixth sign may be the most frustrating of them all. Every conversation somehow ends the same way. You bring up something that hurt you. You calmly explain how you feel. You simply want to solve the problem. But somehow, 10 minutes later, you're the one apologizing. You're comforting the very person who hurt you. You hear yourself saying, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that. Let's just forget about it." The conversation ends. But the original problem never gets solved. Some manipulators don't need to prove they're right. They only need to make you feel guilty for speaking up. They'll say, "After everything I've done for you, you know how stressed I've been. I'm trying my best." Of course, everyone struggles sometimes. Everyone deserves empathy. But empathy should never erase accountability. Healthy relationships make room for both. You can understand someone's pain while still expecting them to take responsibility for their actions. Manipulative relationships work differently. Every time you try to talk about your pain, the conversation quietly shifts back to theirs. After enough repetitions, your brain learns a dangerous lesson. Silence feels safer than honesty. You stop expressing your feelings. You stop asking difficult questions. You stop expecting change. And that's exactly where manipulation becomes strongest. Because once you no longer speak, nobody has to silence you anymore. You're already doing it yourself. But even these 6 signs aren't the end of the story. The final sign is the one that changes everything. Because once it appears, the manipulator barely has to do anything at all. You'll begin controlling yourself. For them, there's a saying that feels almost impossible to forget. The strongest prison isn't the one with iron bars. It's the one that convinces you there's no reason to leave. And that brings us to the final sign. Someone makes you believe you can't live without them. This doesn't happen overnight. No one walks into your life and says, "You need me." If they did, you'd probably walk away immediately. Instead, they build that belief slowly. One small moment at a time. Whenever you try to make a decision, they step in. "Let me handle it. You're not very good at this. I don't want you to make a mistake." At first, it sounds like care. It even feels comforting. Having someone solve your problems can be incredibly reassuring. So you let them. Then, without realizing it, you stop making decisions on your own. You ask what you should wear, where you should work, who you should spend time with, how you should spend your money. Even the smallest choices begin waiting for their approval. What started as convenience becomes dependence. And eventually, dependence turns into fear. The fear that if they ever leave, you won't know how to live without them. A man once described what happened after ending a relationship that lasted nearly 10 years. He expected loneliness. He expected heartbreak. But what surprised him the most was standing alone in a grocery store. He stared at an entire shelf filled with different brands of coffee. For almost 20 minutes, he couldn't choose one. Not because there were too many options, but because for years, someone else had made every small decision for him. That's how dependence grows. It doesn't steal your freedom in a single moment. It quietly teaches you to hand it over, one decision at a time, until one day, you can't remember what confidence used to feel like. Healthy relationships don't make you feel smaller. They help you become stronger. You still have your own opinions, your own friendships, your own dreams, your own voice, and your own ability to stand on your own feet. if your world keeps getting smaller. It may not be love that's growing. It may be dependence. But here's the part most people never expect. The greatest danger isn't always the manipulator. Sometimes, the greatest danger becomes the version of yourself that manipulation creates. Imagine a baby elephant tied to a small wooden stake. It pulls. It struggles. It fights with everything it has. But it can't escape. After enough failed attempts, it stops trying. Years pass. The elephant grows into one of the strongest animals on Earth. Now, it could pull that same stake out of the ground with almost no effort. But it doesn't. Not because it lacks the strength. Because somewhere inside its mind, it still believes escape is impossible. People can experience something similar. After years of being told you're wrong, you begin doubting yourself. After years of feeling guilty, you apologize before anyone asks. After years of being isolated, you stop reaching out. After years of depending on someone else, you become afraid of your own independence. Eventually, the manipulator no longer needs to manipulate you. Your own mind starts doing the work for them. And that may be the most frightening part of all. The good news is the human brain can learn, but it can also relearn. Recognizing manipulation doesn't mean becoming suspicious of everyone. It doesn't mean every difficult relationship is toxic. It simply means learning to recognize patterns. Someone who truly cares about you won't punish you for having boundaries, won't make you question your own reality, won't use your deepest wounds against you, won't slowly separate you from the people who love you, won't make you feel powerless without them. Real love doesn't ask you to become smaller so someone else can feel bigger. It encourages you to grow, to think for yourself, to become more confident, more independent, more fully yourself. Because love and control are not the same thing. One gives you freedom. The other quietly takes it away. The next time someone says, "I'm only doing this because I care about you," don't rush to believe them, but don't rush to reject them either. Instead, ask yourself one simple question. Since this person entered my life, have I become stronger, or have I become more afraid of living without them? Because genuine care expands your world. Manipulation quietly shrinks it. And sometimes, the most dangerous cage is the one you can no longer see. If this video made you see someone, or even yourself, in a different way, then perhaps today wasn't the day you learned something new. Perhaps it was the day you finally noticed what had been there all along.